Hi, everybody. Joy Choden here, and I have Diana Mayoko and writer and producer Jeff Reno with us tonight. Very exciting tonight. So just a little short thing about me. I started the Moonlighting Reunion campaign, and that evolved into the Moonlighting DVD campaign. And I worked with Diana and Christy Taylor and a couple of other good friends of ours that are huge Moonlighting fans. And we were largely responsible for convincing Disney to release all 5 seasons of Moonlighting on DVD. So I'll let you start, Diana, with the questions.
Okay, so we have gathered these questions from our members of our Moonlighting 21 group. So the first question, we'll get right to it, is what was the inspiration for writing Witness for the Execution? The argument David and Maddie had regarding taking Mr. Everett's case was just brilliant.
Thanks a lot. Hi, everyone. I guess the inspiration, we always were looking for, sometimes they would start from an emotional place and we'd find a case that kind of made sense. A lot of times we would try to find an unusual way into a case, the kind of opening or the kind of idea that other detective shows would not necessarily do. That they weren't always the most absolutely real kind of cases, but they were fascinating. We could kind of justify that detectives might do it. In this case, I'm pretty sure that was the first thing that we got to as the case. I just think we thought of the idea of a guy coming in and saying, I need someone to witness my murder. And I think it sounded unusual enough for Moonlighting, and it sounded like something that, I think the disagreement that Maddie and David might have about the case was kind of obvious to us from the beginning. It was, the ethics of that was something that we knew we could have some fun with and get a pretty strong argument out of. So that's my memory, is that it started from there and then grew into the show that it became.
Okay, well, actually, I'm going to skip over to the next question. Was the garage scene always the plan for their first kiss?
Is that it? Oh, go ahead.
Yes, I'm skipping over a question because I want to get to the garage scene. Was that
Sure.
always the plan for the first kiss or the real kiss, or were there some other ideas?
No, I think you're probably in trouble anytime you wonder whether something was always the case on Moonlighting. I think it's probably so much of that show was done seat of our pants. All of us, the writers, Glenn, the cast, just the crew, everyone. So what I remember is that kind of thing was just not discussed. It was like, let's do the first kiss in episode 8. Let's have them sleep together in episode 12 or 18 or 24. I don't think we approached it that way. I think we would get into it and find an idea and follow that idea to, either a fun or unusual or, as often as we could, a very true place emotionally. And then those ideas, like the garage, would come up as we went. And I'm pretty sure we sort of, as we beat this out, we had the kind of the natural argument between the two of them about whether they should be taking it. And David stuck to his guns, but if I'm remembering right, one thing that was kind of nice about it is that he changes his mind. He gets to the old guy, he gets to the home and decides to change his mind and not go through with it. Isn't that? I think that's the way it goes. You guys probably remember the show much better than I do, but and that was kind of a nice thing for us. And it became, and at that point, it became a much more emotional story. It was a little bit of a David you didn't see very often, which is, him kind of understanding what Maddie's issues were, probably thinking a little bit more about it himself. And it became an emotional thing. And then when he got framed, caught for it, and went on the run, the kiss, as far as I remember, just came as we got to that point where we thought, this hasn't really happened yet. A goodbye that may be a permanent goodbye just seems like the best place. It just seems like it was the right time emotionally. And of course, an interesting time for them to do it because, you know, as far as they're thinking, chances are good there won't ever be any repercussions. They don't have to come back from it. They don't have to deal with each other afterwards. They just do this thing they had probably wanted to do for a long time, but didn't really have to answer for it the next day in the office, you know, because he'd be gone. So I think the long answer, it's a long-winded answer, but I think it was about, this seems right now. This is, let's do this because it's emotionally real right now, you know.
And were you surprised by the fans' reaction? It was like a big deal. I mean, the next day, that evening, everybody.
Yeah, you know, I want to say, oh, so gratifying, so fantastic. But honestly, when we were there, we were a little less aware. You know, we certainly knew, you know, that the show was a hit and we were doing well, but you didn't necessarily, no internet, you know. So, you know, we get calls, you know, you get stuff like that, but it wasn't the kind of thing where you got immediate feedback. You know, you really didn't, we didn't suddenly get deluged with hundreds of calls saying, yay, or, you know, fuck, or, you know, I mean, whatever they might say. So yeah, I loved it. I think, you know, if we had, I don't know, it's a little bit self-serving to say, but we might not have been that surprised. We kind of knew at that point that people were following it pretty closely. So I think we sort of knew people might kind of enjoy that moment. Yeah.
Do you remember any reaction from Sybil and Bruce? Like, oh, we're going to kiss, I mean, any feedback or any reaction from them when they saw the script?
I don't. And, you know, I'll just say they were always, and especially that was very early, you know, that was second season, right?
Season 2, yeah. Yeah,
I get it mixed up because we always sort of called that first season sort of a spring tryout. It doesn't seem like a season to me, but it's but you know, yeah, second season. So, you know, it was early and things were just, you know, the show had taken off, and I think they were thrilled with it. And my memory is, and I wasn't down on the stage that first season that much. Like I certainly wasn't down there delivering scripts to them and getting that feedback. Glenn was getting that, but I don't, I can't imagine they had any problem with it. You know, I think they were pretty great with all the stuff that we gave them at that point. Yeah.
Well, being that, you know, Ron Osborne was supposed to join us tonight, but he couldn't make it. But he asked me.
I'm sorry about that, everyone. I'm a lot more interesting, but I'm still sorry he couldn't be here. So.
you have a better memory, maybe.
Maybe so.
But he sent me an email. He asked me to read this regarding the pitching, the idea of a witness for the execution, because he said it's a favorite of mine for a special reason. So I'm just going to read what he wrote.
Good. I was going to tell this story. I'm glad he did. Good.
He said, as I'm sure you know by now, except for a very few exceptions, we never had a finished script at the start of the filming, and by this point in the season, we had learned to live with it. In a meeting, Jeff and I pitched the idea of Glenn only as a setup. A terminally ill patient comes in hooked up to an oxygen tank and in a wheelchair because he has lost the use of his legs. He says he's draining his children's inheritance and he hired someone to put him out of his misery, say at midnight. He wants someone to come in at 12:05 and prove it was a murder, not suicide, because the insurance won't pay off. And if orderlies or whoever come in, they could destroy vital evidence. Now, everything this man says is true except for one thing. Whoever walks in the door at 12:05 will be set up as the murderer, which happens to be David. It turns out he could walk, but had been planning for this a long time, feigning being incapacitated for a year or so. When the time came, he simply got up and turned off his oxygen tank and went back in bed. Glenn said simply, write it. We wrote the first 2 acts, which got us to David falling into the trap and realized we killed the only person who could tell the truth of what happened. And we couldn't figure out how to prove David didn't do it. My memory is that we had 2 days to figure it out. I came home late and couldn't get to sleep and told my wife, Tina, about it. She asked how the guy did it. I told her. She thought for a moment and said, what if his slippers were facing the bed? Now, I know this is clearly a solution that would have not have played on a Magnum or Hill Street Blues or any other procedural at the time, but on Moonlighting, which was a heightened romantic comedy with a heavy dose of whimsy, it probably could. So the next morning, I told Glenn the idea and that my wife had come up with it, and he went for it, followed with "She's a keeper." And then he also, in the same episode, he named the detective using her maiden name, Tapia. So that's so Ron memorializing his wife in a way in this episode. She got her credit.
That's really great. I was going to tell the same story. Yeah. That's exactly what happened.
And I have to say,
Lieutenant Tapia. That's right. That's his wife's name is Tina, and she is. I suspected secretly that she might have been writing most of Ron's stuff. It's nothing I can prove, so we'll see. Yeah.
So anyway, but we did have some of that. He told us that back then, the fanzine, but not to this much detail. So this is great that we got this on record.
Good.
Okay, the next question is, whose concept was The Bride of Tupperman? We thought it was very funny, but David comes off as very sexist.
Yeah, he does. I haven't seen it in a long time, so I'd have to. I'm afraid I might cringe at a little bit of it, but I like the show. But I'm sure you're right about that. The easy excuse is it was 40 years ago almost, so it's we were a little less conscious of that, which is not enough of an excuse. I think I believe. Again, these are a little tough because Ron and I and the other writers sometimes, but we'd just be talking about ideas and they'd come out. I think it was my idea that somebody come into the office and says, "Find my perfect wife." You're detectives, you're used to doing this kind of which again, an unusual beginning to a show. And Ron had the Bride of Frankenstein kind of approach to it with David watching it in the beginning and then sort of likening, the whole show in a way to putting the parts together to make a perfect wife, and that's my memory of the idea. And the sexist part, David was a little bit, he was usually charming enough to get away with it, particularly back then. And I have no real excuse. I'd have to look at it again to see how bad it comes off, but you're not wrong, certainly in the way he approached it. I think it was kind of classic David in that he's pumped up because he's so convinced that this is a slam dunk, that he's, there's no way he's going to lose this one to Maddie. He knows exactly what it's going to take. And I think that extra boost of macho probably came from that a little bit, So I apologize to everyone if it was a little too much, but
no, it was funny. Nowadays it probably wouldn't play, but back then it was played for laughs.
It was, and that may not be enough an excuse anymore. But it's interesting. I'll tell you, just as an added thing, it gives you a little bit of a further view into the way the show was created and written and everything back then. The same thing happened on Tupperman that had happened on Witness, which is we were writing and it was just a little bit ahead of the camera, and we reached the end where I guess you guys, this group kind of knows the shows well enough, I think, for me to refer to scenes, right? I don't remember them all. You guys can probably help me, but I believe the guy that had come into the office was in the hospital bed, right?
Yes.
And David comes in, David and Maddie come in, and the show was getting a little bit long and we had to wrap it up. We had to get to that goofy hospital chase. And is that the one where Sybil's legs are up out of the basket, maybe? Yeah.
No, that's the male.
Okay.
Yeah.
David is pushing her in a wheelchair. She's back in a wheelchair.
That's it. I knew he was pushing her. That's right. And we did not have time or an idea for solving the crime, which was a little tough. So we have them come in. You guys probably remember. So we have them come in, and David just lays it out. And Maddie says, "When did you figure that out?" And he said, "During the commercial." Right? Which was one of my favorite breaking the fourth wall jokes that we did, and that was, like the slippers. It was a very last second solution that we found because we were in a corner, and
The other pretty cool breaking the fourth wall was when he was in when he said to the camera, he'll be the biggest bigamist in bigamy history.
Yeah.
Tupperman, that's a great one.
Well, then you said, try saying that 3 times.
Yeah, try saying that fast 3 times.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
Okay, well, okay, next question. There was a scene written and filmed in The Sun Also Rises in which David and his father take a walk outside of Blue Moon and discuss David Sr.'s wedding. Now, Alan Arkish, who directed the episode, told us that we would often lose 10 minutes per show. Do you recall any other scenes that were actually filmed but never aired?
Oh, wow. There's one. God, there's one that comes to me immediately. I don't know. There probably were a lot. I'm guessing more often it was pieces of scenes, that was just the usual editing, and you just would add it up to 10 minutes. But I do remember one, and I'm fairly sure we filmed it. It could have been cut before it filmed, but I think we filmed it. I wasn't on the stage at the time, but it was in our Shakespeare episode that Ron and I wrote. And after there's a little montage of things where David's going to Maddie's door in like catcher's mask and suit of armor and that kind of stuff, right? And it builds, and she's not letting him in, or she's, and I believe right after that, I think on the show now, you sort of cut to whether it's the narrator or whatever. I think they're at dinner and she's a bit tamed, right? Is that sort of, or she seems to be, right? And there's dinner. She had her gruel, but they're, and she sort of makes a nice request. The top of that scene, it might have even been a separate little scene, but at the top of it was David coming home from a hard day's work, a 9-to-5 job in Elizabethan costumes, but carrying a briefcase. Oh God, well, I think it was a briefcase with chicken legs sticking out one end and some feathers sticking out another. So his 9-to-5 job had been, I guess catching food for him or whatever. But and a little bit of a scene. It might have been. I don't know if it was a couple pages or not. A page or two of a scene between them, and sort of transitioning from, he was still being kind of an asshole and the tough guy and the whole bit, but he was, he had his briefcase and he was saying to, hi honey, I'm home, back from a hard day's work, whatever. And I think there were lines like, my wife, I think I'll keep her, which again, more sexist stuff from Elizabeth and David, but and that was not in the show at all. We just started at the dinner, which came right after that. And I think we filmed it, but I can't remember very many. It's hard to know for sure. It's been a long time.
Okay, actually, the next question is about Atomic Shakespeare. Was Sybil really tied up or fake tied at the church? Was she tied longer than necessary, and why? This was brought up in a Moonlighting, what's it called? The Moonlighting Memories bonus feature.
No, it was fake tied up. They put the gag in her mouth, and then between scenes, they'd take that out. Fake tied up. She usually stayed there because the ropes and stuff were a little bit elaborate. They had to look real, but it was definitely fake. We were down there, and I had heard since that we had her tied up, not we, but all of us had her tied up in a few different shows, I think. And I believe she was tied up for real in one very early show. I don't know if it was the pilot or not. Maybe in her house when those guys had the two of them. I think
it was the pilot.
Yeah, I think she might have been tied up for real, and either she didn't like it or someone there realized that's not a good thing to do. So I don't think she was ever tied up for real after that. I know she wasn't in the Shakespeare show.
Okay. Now, was season 3 always the season when Maddie and David were going to get together? And was it Sybil's pregnancy that made the decision? And did you feel it was the right time?
No, and yes. How's that? No, and it's the same deal. Nothing was always planned to be the time for anything on that show. So it very much came out of wait, what was the second part of that? This might be part of the answer.
Was it Sybil's pregnancy that made the decision?
Right. No. So both those are no. Very much was a result of the trilogy with Mark Harmon And the fact that things heated up so much, and that, you know, he wanted to marry her, Harmon wanted to marry her, and David was extremely jealous, and it got rather soapy. It got rather melodramatic even at the time. And the fact that had been building, I think we all just realized as we were planning, mapping that out, which is really just before we were writing it and airing it, shooting it. We just realized, I don't think this will be too much to try to carry this on any further. You can't hit this level of intensity and, get her that close, but she's not doing it because of her feelings for David. And it just felt like that would have been a tease too much, but we didn't know that until we had sort of gotten into the midst of the Harmon episodes, you know. So it came late in the planning of those episodes that we decided this is the time. And the yes is, yeah, I definitely think it was time. I think it was a good time to do it. I think it was the right show to do it in. I think it was the right, the right time emotionally. I think that was all good. Yeah.
Was the network pushing it too for it to happen?
You know, Glenn wrote with the network more. I didn't hear that they were. I think at that point, they kind of trusted us to do the show. I'm sure there were questions, you know, asking Glenn, like, when's it going to happen? And my guess is he put them off, you know, and just said when it's right, you know, when it's true, would be his words. I've got that. So I don't know is the answer. I doubt seriously they were pushing hard, but I'll bet they were curious at least. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we are curious. The network.
Yeah.
Okay. Now this question's been asked many times, and no one seems to know the answer to this. But why was music played over David finally telling Maddie that he loves her in the episode "I Am Curious, Maddie"?
Where does he do it? Is it the very end where after they've been in bed? Is his hand over his mouth a little bit? Is that where it is?
Her hand. Yeah, her hand's over his. Yeah.
Okay. I barely remember, and I will. This is not definitive, but I think it was not scripted, which is really weird. I don't know that Bruce would ever do that because they were so great about doing the scripts, but I don't remember that being scripted, and I don't know if maybe he thought it would be a good idea or it just came out. I'm not sure, but it was hidden enough, and the closing music had already started. And the feeling around there was that's a step too far. It just is a commitment too far. You know, it was fantastic that these guys got together. But there were a lot, you know, we didn't know where everything was going to go after this. And there were a lot of, in our minds, steps to play out before they said that to each other, sort of. Even if we might have sort of sensed it, you know, or knew it, you know, we didn't. The saying of it felt like a step too far is the answer.
So to expand on that, do you have any idea where Glenn was thinking about taking the relationship after they slept together, other than her going to Chicago and running off? Was there did you have any idea where he wanted to play their relationship other than her, you know, running off to Chicago? What he wanted?
We all did. Ron and I had started writing a little something. Yeah, we all had talked about, and by the way, only in a general way. But it might be, maybe this is a good time to say it. You guys are probably way ahead of me, but it might be a good time to put to rest all this bullshit about the moonlighting curse. It's just not a thing. What happened? It really had almost nothing to do with the fact that they slept together, the fact that the show wasn't as good after that. It just, we had a lot of fun ideas, general ideas. We didn't have like shows in the works, but general ideas about a way to keep that alive, you know, whether it's like fighting, going back to bed together, fighting, you know, I mean, but just, it would escalate, but it would still maintain the relationship they had. It wasn't just going to fall into place. They weren't going to suddenly get married. There was nothing like that. it was going to be able to continue more or less in the same way that it was going, but it was not going to be. I mean, you know, it just would have elevated it emotionally, but it still could exist on that same plane very much. And very, very simple thing. Sybil got pregnant, and we wrote that in and had to go. She had to go back to Chicago because she wasn't available. I mean, her character went back to Chicago because Sybil wasn't available, and we had to shoot all her stuff. I believe it was early summer. And then she had to go away for the pregnancy. And then Bruce came in, and he had been doing Die Hard. And then we had to shoot all his stuff. He was in a separate city. We had a couple phone calls. We had the claymation thing that Ron and I did. But overall, the simplest answer in the world is that we were doing a romantic comedy where the two leads were never in a room together. You know, that made the fourth season. You know, we all did our best, you know, and claymation was a way to kind of create a scene between them. You know, we tried, but you can't do, and you know, this was, you know, above all else by far a romantic comedy. And it's just all about those two people. And if we're not together for an entire season, there just was no way it was going to be the same show, you know? So that's really the simple thing that happened then.
And can you share do you remember anything of what you were writing, like you mentioned about what it went at all? Do you remember anything if she hadn't ran off to Chicago? Do you remember anything?
You know, I remember, oh God, I remember an idea for a show because there were going to be, one of the things that we thought would be fun, I believe, is, I think trying some shows that were not so dependent upon their relationship, you know, so we didn't have to be we didn't really want to deal with that particular emotional issue constantly, you know. Mm-hmm. So I think finding, you know, fun kind of things where maybe you wouldn't have to think about that for this episode or for a few episodes, you know, things like that, where they could kind of exist like they always had as the fun, bantering, kind of at odds, whatever, you know, and it wouldn't really have to accelerate or decelerate the relationship. It existed on its own. And I know Ron and I had come up with an idea for a show that we just never got a chance to do, which was All in the Dark. We wanted to do a show all in black, and basically like a radio show. And what was fun to us is that it was a show that was, you know, based on a lot of fun, fast dialogue. And we thought that would really work, you know, and there would be a reason for it. It'd be like a blackout or something, no power. They're stuck somewhere without power, something like that. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to just do it all. And there'd be things going on. You'd have fun, you know, is that your shoulder? You know, I mean, you would have that kind of fun thing going on in the dark all the time. But you'd also probably have a murder, probably that kind of stuff. And I don't remember the details of it, but that was an idea. And I think it may give you a sense of just the kinds of things maybe we could have done. We could have had, it might have even shot our imagination up a little bit to think of more of those things so we could kind of keep it, you know, so we didn't always have to be dealing with a will they or won't they, are they going to get married, or, you know, we didn't want that to be the show all the time, you know, so yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
Sure.
Now, was it ever discussed not to put her pregnancy into the storyline? So many leading actresses get pregnant and they hide it. She could have gone to Chicago to figure out her feelings for David and then come back and get it back on track. So
I can't remember, honestly. My guess is this one was, you know, she didn't come to the staff and announce it. I'm sure she sat down with Glenn and told him. And I honestly don't remember, you guys. I think he might have come to us, and when we were sitting in the writer's room just all talking about it, he might have just said, I think, let's put the pregnancy in the show. But I honestly don't remember how that happened. I don't remember any debates about let's not do it, let's do it. I think and you know, to his or defense or whatever, I you know, probably thought at that point to be an interesting idea. You know, that it might give us all kinds of interesting things to play. So, you know, yeah.
Okay. And was it supposed to be understood that David knew in the end that he was the father of the baby?
Is that at the end of the series?
Yeah, we see it in a womb. We see it in a womb with a view that it's obvious it's David's. The angel confirms it that it's David's baby.
Right. So what are you guys asking about the end of the series, or what?
I think the question is, did David, was it ever, are we the fans ever supposed to understand that David was the father, or did David ever knew, had a clue, or?
I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. We left, Ron and I left at the end of the 4th season, and so did Glenn. I know he came back and wrote Womb with a View, but the horrible admission is I haven't watched most of the 5th season. I just figured we're not going to be there. Glenn's not going to be there. It's not going to be the same show, you know. And I haven't. So I don't know the answers to those things. And if we had discussed it at the end of the 4th, I don't remember what they came up with. I'm not sure.
Okay. And
sorry about that.
Okay. I'm going to do the next one. Who decided the Walter storyline would be a good idea? Where was it meant to lead? So marrying a stranger on the train.
Well, I'll answer the second one first. It was meant to go right down the drain. That one was all Glenn. He had gone off during the 4th season to direct a movie, Clean and Sober, the movie with Michael Keaton. And he came back sometime, whenever that was, that next spring, and came back with that idea. And it was, you know, right when Sybil was going to come back on the show, and he announced to us that this is what happened, that she met Walter and married him on the train. And the truth is, what the hell? I'll tell you the story. I hated it, and I think the staff did too. I know Ron didn't like it either, but I sometimes was the more vocal on the staff, and I told him what I thought of it, and we argued a little bit. I wasn't being mean. I was just saying, you know, they've been waiting all this time for these two. I just don't think anyone's going to like this at all. I think it's going to backfire. And Glenn took me into the office, and Ron was in there. You know, if he were here, he would verify this. But he didn't talk. He didn't say anything because it was a little bit heated. And Glenn just didn't want to be questioned about any of it. And you know, I told him all you know, the reasons that I had. I tried to be very clear and sane about it, and explained it to him that I think it's wrong, you know. And by the way, Glenn, you know, made so many great decisions on the show. You know, I had such respect for his thinking and his writing, but I just thought this one was way off, and told him, and it got pretty heated. And at one point he said, well, maybe it would just be better if you left the show, you know. So it was on kind of the verge of getting fired that moment, you know. And yeah, and I said, that's not at all what I want out of this. I'm just trying to tell you what I think's going to happen. You know, go for it. And then he turned around and said, which was kind of interesting, and a kind of a decent look into the way he thinks sometimes. He said, I want you and Ron to write it. The scene where she tells David about it, not that whole show, but that point. Because he said, with your feelings being that strong against it, you will do everything you can to make it palatable. And so he had us write it. And, you know, I don't think we made it palatable, but we did our best with it. But, you know, it just was a bad idea. Yeah, I just don't think it was ever going to work. I don't know if you guys agree, but it's just.
Oh, it was the jump the shark moment.
It was.
Yeah. And other writers, even Deborah Frank, I mean, she was credited with it. And she said she wasn't even on the show then. Like nobody wanted to be credited with that episode.
No, I don't think Glenn even likes talking about it when he's asked about it. And it was absolutely 100% his, and insisted very, very strongly on it.
Do you remember why he thought it was a good idea?
You know, I don't know. And look, my God, we all have bad ideas. We all have ideas that don't work. I certainly had ideas on that show that didn't work, but I can't guess. If I wanted to play psychologist, it might be that he and Sybil were not getting along then. She pretty much had him fired right after that season. Mm-hmm. And it could have been kind of a subconscious strike at her, just to make her do something this stupid. But I think maybe more generous to Glenn might be that, I don't know if you guys know, there's an old movie called His Girl Friday, which is a classic Cary Grant, Rosalind Russell thing. And Rosalind Russell comes back and they have a Maddie David relationship, or Maddie and David have a Cary Grant, Rosalind Russell. And she was with Ralph Bellamy, and he was going to marry her. And he was, a sweet, boring guy. Mm-hmm. And he gave them something to have, he gave the guy something to have fun with. And I would guess Glenn's reasoning might have been, let's mix it up with another guy. It had been done in a very different way with Mark Harmon. He was a true editor. Dennis Dugan would not be seen as that, and Glenn was a bold storyteller, so he probably liked the idea of doing marriage rather than I met a guy on a train. He probably just wanted to do an in-your-face thing. And by the way, that's all guessing. I only know that I didn't like it, and he really did, and we fought. But I'm sure there was legit thinking behind some of it, but I don't know otherwise. I think it was just a miss. It was just, like we all have. That was a big one, because it hurt the show. But yeah.
I mean, early in the episode, Maddie is on a train and she can't stop the train, and it's her nightmare, and she literally crashes the train into Blue Moon. I mean, it's literally a train wreck. So it's like, that scene is telling you that this episode is going to end as a train wreck, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah. It fits. Yeah, it fits.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Is there some sort of hidden meaning behind Maddie's speech to David and Ika's spouse about how their relationship is going beyond licenses and vows?
I'm sorry, I don't remember that show well enough. Can you give it? Maybe if you give me context, I can help you, but I can't remember well.
Yeah. So it's the next episode after Tracks of My Tears, and they're trying to, they have a case. It's, very similar. The case, of course, kind of, is sort of fitting where they are in their relationship and their situation. And so it's about a cheating spouse and a mistress. And they have this conversation in the car. She doesn't understand why he's like not showing his anger and his sadness about this bombshell she dropped on him, that she ran off and got married to a stranger. And she's getting angry at him that he won't admit his feelings for her. And she holds his hand in the car and she says, what we have, what we're going to be, goes beyond licenses and vows. So, and David's just like, all right, as long as I can, don't have to keep, stop trying with you. And that's where they leave it. It's kind of awkward and weird scene.
It sounds like it. And I'm sorry, I don't remember it, but I can't guess really because, she was married. So I don't know, that almost sounds like an invitation to cheat. I don't quite know what that meant. I mean, I'm sure it was an attempt to say something like, we have something very special and it's not going to be ruined, by the fact that Walter's in my life. But it doesn't really resonate with me. I don't quite get it. I'm not sure. What they have might be much beyond licenses and vows, but it seems like a weird thing to say in the midst of her actually being married, so I don't know.
It's very weird. And I mean, obviously, the next episode, she gets a divorce from Walter, I think Maddie Hayes Got Married is a very funny episode, and it's very well written and performed. But the last episode, Flesh Made Word, she tells him that she's divorced now. She got the marriage annulled, and now they're going to try to make the relationship work. So the show does end on a high note, and then there was a writer's strike, basically. So, but yes, it is weird, and Maddie, is so out of character. That's the thing, because like earlier in the season, in Tupperman, Bride of Tupperman, she talks about that there's only one wedding and only one moment, and it's totally out of character for Maddie.
It is. It's a way too big volunteering of something, and I'm sorry to whoever wrote it. I just don't remember. I don't remember the moment that well.
Okay. All right. Let's see. What was the plan if the writer's strike had not interrupted the end of season 4?
Well, you just had said, and then the writer's strike, I don't remember it as interrupting the season exactly. I thought, let's see, my thinking was that we were done. Remember the episode where we danced, where the writers got up from, we were on holding the strike signs?
Yep.
Because we were supposedly 7 or 8 minutes short or something. I think that was, God, what I'm remembering is that was going to be the last show of the season. I don't think the strike interrupted it. So the question would be more what might have gotten done earlier in 5th season. And, Ron and I quit right after that last episode, right after our dancing debut on TV. We decided, I went off and just had an amazing dancing career on Broadway. It was really nice. That's not true. Right? But yeah, and then Glenn was gone too. So I don't think there was much. I don't know what the strike might have interrupted, but I don't think there was much left in the season. And I think, 5th season was just delayed. So I don't know how to answer that one. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. If you had full control over the end of Maddie and David's story, what would you have done? Would you have married them off? Are you in the road of, the sunset, they ride off together, camp? Did you always have in mind that when the show was finally over that they would end up together?
We didn't always have in mind anything. Same answer as those other couple of times, unfortunately. And if I had to think, there was absolutely not a plan in the years I was there for how it would end. We didn't really know. I don't know the answer. I probably was probably not a ride off into the sunset, but absolutely together. So probably some kind of little wink, like, this is going to go on forever. But I don't think I would have married him and ridden off on the same horse together, kind of. I don't think and I know that would have been satisfying. Maybe who knows? Maybe that would have sounded best then. But there's a better idea somewhere, just a way that they're together, but you're winking at it a little bit. I think there's something in that area, a little bit more of a smile. I don't think that particular show would do something as flat out on the nose as just the cans and the just married behind the car or something. I don't think we would have done it, but I don't know. And I don't actually know how it ended. I shouldn't say that, but.
Well, Agnes and Bert get married instead.
I thought someone had told me that. That's great. That's great. I love those two. I love them as actors. I love them as people. They're just the best.
I think they could have gotten engaged. Like he could have done some really fun proposal to her. That could have been a cool way to end it.
Sure. Maybe that's even the wink. Then he does something classic old style David that makes her wonder if she's done the right thing. Anything like that would be. I think you want to have a bit of a smile, but feel pretty good about their future. That's how I would probably go. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would have been a good ending. How well did experience, observe Sybil and Bruce personally to integrate into their characters' dynamics? What were your dealings with Bruce and Sybil?
Mine with Sybil were not a lot, pretty just professional. We got along. I didn't really talk to her a lot. you know, talk to her about the material sometimes, go down there. We had a couple meals with all the writers, but it was minimal. She tended not to be out there, you know, kind of interacting quite as much. Bruce was a friend at the time. I went to his bachelor party and his wedding, and or the ceremony that he had in LA anyway. And he asked Ron and I to write Hudson Hawk. He had, I don't know if you remember the movie he made. Yeah. He had a sort of a one-liner idea about an ex-con, and he asked us to write it, which is what we were doing 4th season while we were doing the show. We were kind of doing it at the same time. So we'd go over to his trailer on Die Hard when he was shooting that, which is right down the street from our offices, and talked to him about that a lot during that time, and had a lot of fun doing it. The short story is Die Hard came out, was fantastic, huge. A guy named Joel Silver had produced that, and Bruce gave Joel Silver our Hudson Hawk script. Bruce loved it, but Silver tossed it and brought his own writer in and made a different movie, which I don't think is a great movie. But anyway, so we didn't keep going. But during the time, we got along great with him, really, really well. So, you know, just a good guy.
Did you stand up?
Remember he's I remember in the dance sequence when he first comes in and we've got the strike signs, he kind of smacks me on the back of the head.
Yes.
That was kind of it. Yeah. I think you were saying to ask something that I.
Yeah, but after, I'm sorry, I was going to ask you, like after Die Hard, did you keep in touch with him anyway throughout his career when he was doing other movies?
Not throughout, but a little. We early '90s, we were going to do a show with them. We talked for a while. Then we sort of lost touch. We all got busy, and then a few years ago, well, actually a year or two before COVID. Bruce got a hold of us. He and his brother David was a PA on the show, and then helped, I think, produce some of Bruce's stuff later. And he had been a friend of ours too. And he got us over there, and we were going to do an animated show for Bruce. And we had heard kind of that there were some issues on sets, you know, that Bruce was using an earpiece, and that things that he was having a rough time at times. And we didn't really know the extent of it. We hadn't been in touch at that point, I don't think at all, for a little while. And so we didn't really know what was going on. And we met with them, and we'd have meetings, and some terrific meetings. They were really fun. Like I think 2019-ish. I think this is when it was. And we would notice, you know, an occasional non sequitur or something that didn't quite gel with the conversation. So we were a little in the dark, but also noticed, you know, something's going on. He had a very good friend of his in the room that I think kind of was with him on all the productions he was going to do. So he would have been on the show too. But then I think not long before COVID, he just had to call it off. And you know, we knew there were health issues, but we didn't know the extent of it until he came out, you know, with it. So it was just really sad, you know. We were really, really looking forward to doing something with him again, you know, but sad thing anyway.
Yeah, I remember you guys posting or saying something on your Facebook pages a while back about getting together with him again. So that was that animated project. Ron posted I think he did a Facebook thing, you know, with the three of us at I think at CAA. Excuse me. Yeah, a little premature. I think he said the band is back together or something, you know. Yeah. But it was a little bit before the fact. But anyway, I'm really sorry about all of that. You know, it's just sad.
Yeah, I know. How challenging was it to construct rapid fire overlapping dialogue?
Well, it's always a challenge, but I loved it. It was always my favorite writing. I love those old screwball comedies. Like His Girl Friday was always a big favorite of mine. For me personally, you know, it was my favorite kind of writing. I had written, Ron and I, when we first got together, we were in a class, a writing class. I had come out here for I think I'd just been out here for a few weeks, and got into this class, and that's where I met Ron, and we each kind of wrote scripts and then sort of put our names on each other's, and helped each other out and stuff. That's my phone. And it was a MASH script that we did that got us our work, and that got us started. Mork and Mindy was our first job, our first step, and we got right on staff. And it was all about MASH. And so we did sitcoms the first few years. We did Mork and Mindy and Night Court, and we were on staff and a couple of things like that. But and it went really well. But I think I was always hoping for this kind of writing. Mm-hmm. And I will be completely immodest just for a sec. I don't know if this is a tangent, but Ron and I had a really good year, and we had just done Night Court, and they asked us back to produce, and Cheers, which was already on the air, asked us to come on and be producers on their show. And we'd also written a pilot, which was a private detective. It was a private detective who had 3 ex-wives that he kind of got involved in his cases. It wasn't our idea, but we wrote it. And we wrote it a lot like Moonlighting, very fast-paced romantic comedy with this guy and these 3 women, and detective-y. And that's what Glenn saw. Our agent got that to Glenn, and that's why he hired us when he was putting a staff together. And we had these 2 great opportunities with big hit shows, half-hour comedies, to go on to those as producers. And we just saw, I think Ron felt the same way. I'm sure he did. But I know I saw that those first 6 episodes of Moonlighting before Glenn had a staff, and just fell in love with what it could be. And so we took a chance. We took the Moonlighting job instead of a couple of more sure things. So very roundabout way of saying, no, none of this writing is easy, and this dialogue was never easy. I loved it, but I'm, it came more easily for me than I think other things did. I've always just loved this kind of stuff. So.
Was Atomic Shakespeare the biggest challenge you wrote for Moonlighting?
Well, I hope I'm not getting too long-winded. I'm hearing myself talk a lot, and I don't know if it's okay, but
it's fine.
Okay.
You're not at all.
All right, Diana, you're just sitting there quietly.
Yep. I'm listening. I've got more questions. I've got more after this.
I know. I'm kidding. Here's the truth. Ron and I have said this before, and it's absolutely not meant to sound immodest. There was something about the Shakespeare show that hit the spot for us, and I think because it was the banter and the fast-paced stuff that we love, but it also was more broadly comedic than a lot of the shows. And we had this thing, Taming of the Shrew, to make fun of, not copy, but I mean, do takeoffs on. And I think having that as a kind of template to work from, and where we could riff off of it, weirdly made that, not easy at all, but easier than a lot of the stronger Moonlightings, I think. There was just something that fit our sensibility with it. And, I to this day, I won't quite understand it, but I see why. There's a tiny bit of sketch comedy, a tiny bit of broader comedy. It was just a very cool sweet spot for us. I love doing it.
So what do you think was the biggest challenge scene episode to write for you guys?
Wow. I think I'll tell you a couple things. I'll get something off my chest while I do it. I think my memory is that knowing her might have been the most difficult because it was our first, and we had written the limbo scene in an earlier episode. We had written a couple scenes, but we hadn't done a whole show yet. And doing that, and it was an emotional show. It was a former girlfriend and all of that. I remember that being, our first draft being a little bit tough. We had a little more time on that. We got a second draft. We got a lot closer. And sometimes I can gauge the difficulty of a script by how much or whether it had to be rewritten by Glenn. And knowing her, I still think it was a lot. By the second draft, a lot of it was ours. But I always remember one thing in particular. This was it was a fun learning curve, kind of. There's a scene in it where Bruce and Dana Delaney stop the car in a park, and in a park, and get out, and they talk, and that's where they see the murder off in the distance. Mm-hmm. I know I can talk to you guys about it. No one else would know what the hell I was talking about, but you guys know this stuff. It's amazing.
Yep.
Whether it was one shot or two and all that stuff. We wrote a whole scene between Bruce and Dana, and a moonlighting-ish scene, a little more serious, but and I didn't think it was particularly good. I don't think we found, it was somewhere in between comedy and drama, and I don't think we found it exactly. And when Glenn got it, I don't believe he rewrote much of the script, but he did. He took that scene out. They get out, and I think they might have an exchange with each other or something. But he put This Old Heart of Mine over it, which might have been a Bruce choice, but it was Glenn's idea to put the song. And it became an almost silent scene with music doing all the work for you. So I don't know if this is really answering your question, but I remember all of that being a little difficult because we weren't quite finding the tone that we needed when we want to maintain the comedy, but we have a particularly dramatic storyline, like the Dana Delaney one was. That was, and I don't think we found it. And I think he just solved it beautifully with this music, which was fantastic. So, and then I think Sun Also Rises was a bit tough also, but I think it was falling in place, and also we were having to do it last second all the way. But I guess I'll just take this time to get this off my chest because it reminds me of all that. Glenn just did some beautiful writing. He's a terrific writer, and he just deserves all the credit in the world. He created the show, and he did so much great stuff. But the stuff about everything going through his typewriter, and I heard him on the Shakespeare commentary, and just how things were all heavily rewritten, and they just weren't. It just isn't the truth. I didn't always see the other writers' drafts. I know Roger, director, had some great ideas. I saw Karen Hall's draft of Mulberry Street, and it was beautiful, and I think it was fairly close to what aired. Carrie Aaron had some so nice ideas. She was new, and Ron and I just didn't get rewritten that much. There were times when Glenn would take it and, put ... in more places, or have a longer parenthetical, if you guys know what that is. It really, he greatly overstates that. And it's been a long time, and it's not something I think about, but when these things come up, it's frustrating. It's frustrating. I know he said on the commentary that, it was sort of the backhanded compliment. He was very nice about the script we wrote. But he said, I don't think I rewrote much of anything except the ending. And then said later, I probably pumped it up along the way. And he, just for everyone to know, I get to say it in a little bit of a public forum, he did not write a word of Shakespeare. Not a single thought or word was his, and that includes the opening and closing with the kid and his mom. He didn't write any iambic pentameter, and further, he had never ever. I'm going to go on. You guys okay? Hanging in?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I'm just going to tell you. He likes to say that the whole show was based on him seeing a production of Taming of the Shrew in the park, and you can ask any of the writers. That was never ever said around that writing. We never heard anything like that at all, and in fact, that just was not the inspiration for this show. I was driving into work one morning, and I was actively looking for something unusual, like the Black and White show had been first season. And honest to God, the entire idea of doing it all in iambic pentameter in Elizabethan came to me in a single thought, one of those weird times where it just does. And what came to me was doing Hamlet, because Hamlet is a story of a wife and her husband's brother killing the husband to take over, So I thought it was a great detective show. And when I got in and told Ron about it, that's what we started working on. We were working on Hamlet for a while, and we just didn't like the way it was panning out. And we went in and we pitched it. The whole writer's room was there. We went in and pitched it and told him how we were feeling, but we'd really love to do this show on iambic pentameter. And Ron said, Taming of the Shrew. That was Ron's idea. And that's when Glenn said, that's it. Mm-hmm. So contrary to earlier reports by Glenn, he's, classic writer, bright guy, just kind of liked to edge in there and take a little more of the writing credit than maybe he should have. And it was frustrating to us. It just was, because we loved that show and we were working so hard on it, So that's just a tiny, tiny bit of setting the record straight on you guys' side. So sorry for that tangent, but that was just a thing,
No, thank you so much for all your honesty.
No,
thank
sure.
you.
Sure.
Well, I mean, this is basically the same thing you were just talking about. When Glenn would do his inevitable rewrites up to the time of filming, how often did you say to him, you know what, you're wrong about this. It's fine the way it is. And how often did that work out for you?
I never did. Honestly, Shakespeare was a first draft. And it was, I think Ron and I finished maybe up through the wedding. Through Good Lovin' and all that, maybe before they started shooting. I don't even know if we got that far. And then we were writing a day ahead of the camera the rest of the way. So it was absolutely a first draft. And another reason why nobody could have touched it. It was just all shooting right away. But, and wow, more power to Bruce and Sybil for memorizing this thing that fast. It just incredible to me. But that happened a lot of times with Glenn too. Most of the time, his rewrites, however light or heavy they might have been with everyone's scripts, because I truly don't know with the other writers. I just know with ours. He tended not to do that until sometimes the morning of. And so I really wouldn't see his rewrites very often until they went to the stage. So there really wasn't ever a time where we could question his rewrites or would say anything. So I think the same reason. I think he did it to make so it happened for the network too. So the network really couldn't speak to it either. There was just no time to make him change anything. So I didn't do that. I probably wouldn't have done it. He was my boss. I finally did get to a point fourth season where I had the big argument with him and almost lost the job. But that wasn't even a rewrite. That was at idea stage. So, I'll tell you, I will always, take credit for the writing we did, and I'm really proud of it. But whatever he was doing was almost always terrific. I mean, I just love the writing on the show. I had very, very few times when I had any issue with it. When really, so whoever was doing all of it was doing a good job. And I know a lot of it was his. I mean, I'm sure he did a lot of stuff, but anyway.
What are your favorite moments that made it to screen that exceeded your expectations, and where would you credit that success?
Oh, golly. I don't know. Remember the pianist envy scene in Shakespeare? I love how that came out, and when she was on his lap and when she yelled that at him, it was a favorite line of mine. And I love that.
How about Zounds, what mounds?
I love that. I believe that was Ron's line, and I said I love that. I love that. I've heard Bruce say that that a lot of people would come up to him off screen and say that to him. So I think that really hit big. Boy, it's tough. there were a few chase scenes. I was always a fan of the hearse chase. And it's fun, you know, you think of these things and, you know, and watching them, you know, when they pull them off that well. But the idea that all the cars followed and it was kind of a slow motion chase over the bumps, and I like the way they did that. There were a lot of times where it was just about silliness. You know, I love Bruce trailing behind Maddie like the Hunchback. And you know, I think almost always, I'm sure there were some directors I should be praising, but yeah, I give so much of the credit to Bruce and Sybil. They were just both awesome in the roles. You know, I just think they were great. You know, I just think they were great. You felt everything from them. They just nailed the comedy. It was just, I love Bruce's silliness at times, you know, which some of it was scripted, but you know, he'd add a little, you know, he'd do a little Three Stooges thing or something sometimes. And so I don't know, I can't think of many more than that specifically, but boy, they would enhance everything, you know, which is great. It's kind of rare, actually. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So were there moments, scenes you wrote for Agnes and Bert that did not make it, that were disappointing?
Disappointing because they didn't make it, or
yeah, it didn't make it into the show.
I don't think so. I don't remember. They were all, you know, Ron and I did a lot of writing on the Casablanca one. I don't know, maybe we were credited with that. Here's Living with You, Kid, or something. Maybe. We did a lot of writing on that, and that was really fun. I don't remember scenes being lost there. I think, like I said earlier, I just really love those two. They were just both terrific people and terrific actors who, you know, didn't always get to do enough, but it's kind of tough when you've got a show with those two in the lead, you know. But I don't remember anything that was just, you know, they were always great in their scenes, and I can't remember anything that got lost because of it. No, you know, it seems like a natural thing to get cut, but I don't think I you know, Glenn might tell you differently, but I don't remember that. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Here's Living with You, Kid is brilliant.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It was really fun. It's not going to be a fan favorite because it's not Bruce and Sybil, but we had a great time, you know. If Ron were here, you know, I love Casablanca, but if Ron were here, he would definitely tell you it's one of his couple of favorite movies of all time. So I want to get that in for him too. But yeah, we just had a terrific time doing that, and they were so good in it. You know, Curtis was a riot. You know, he was great. He was great. I'm so glad they got a couple chances to do their thing too. You know.
Yeah, they got their own black and white episode.
Yeah, Curtis really took up the mantle of comedy, really, in the season 4, since David had to be so serious about missing Maddie. Yeah,
I know, which is great. Thank goodness for it. It's just not enough when people are used to and wanting Bruce and Sybil. You know, it's just too bad. You know.
Okay, now my questions, we just have a few more, but when I was a media buyer at ABC, when I was a media buyer, ABC would send programming notes or newsletters to advertisers, and one of them had some storylines that Moonlighting writers were working on, and some we saw and some we didn't. I sent you a copy. I don't know if you have it in front of you.
I saw. I think there were 4 of them on there, maybe. Yeah, I saw them.
Yeah. Yes, it says, can you comment on them and tell us what other storylines were being considered but never made? So I guess one of them, it said, okay, I'll read it.
One of them Shakespeare, I think, right?
Yeah, one of them said, the first one says unique scripts. In one episode, they'll speak only in iambic pentameter. Okay,
right,
so
that was hard.
That. Now, the next one said unusual characters. David's ex-wife and his dad. Imagine a Chuck Barris type. Remember that one?
No. Well, that, you know, it's weird because I had a movie idea that I had just been kicking around, and Glenn came to us and asked Ron and I to do the first show of the 3rd season. As Ever Sun Also Rises was?
Yes.
Yeah.
First episode.
He asked us to do the first show of the 3rd season, and do we have any ideas? And I went back and I had this movie idea, which was a father marrying a little younger woman who had slept with, I don't know if it was his girlfriend or slept with the son. I think it was Girlfriend, because I needed the movie to play out longer. And so Ron and I turned that into the show idea and pitched it to Glenn. And he really liked it. I think for the show, the fun was the woman ends up not remembering David. You know, that was kind of funny to us. But otherwise, yeah, it was basically this movie. And that seems to be the one that refers to in a way. But I never pitched it as ex-wife. I don't think so. But maybe that's just how the network got it or something. Maybe that's what they said. But it was ex-girlfriend or ex-lover or something like that was it.
Yeah. But the thing that caught my attention was his dad being a Chuck Barris type. I know we got Paul Sorvino instead.
We got Sorvino. Yeah, I don't know where the Barris thing came from. I don't specifically remember ever thinking that way. I was watching the Gong Show and I loved Barris, but I don't remember that being a thing. I don't remember. Maybe Glenn talked to them about that behind the scenes, but I can't imagine. Barris is funny. I can't imagine him being a good David father. Sorvino was just more just feels like more of the type. I don't know. That worked to me. But.
Okay. Another storyline that says unbelievable situations. Maddie and David are hired to guard a dinosaur bone, and before you know it, they're lost in time and must conquer a monster and save Tokyo. Is this a dream?
It was never beat out as a story. It was always talked about. I believe it came from Glenn. I don't know if he heard it from someone else, but we always just called it the Godzilla episode. And that's what we wanted to do. Something along the lines of Godzilla. That was one approach to it that we thought. I think the writers just messing around came up with other funny ways to do it. I can't remember, but it was talked about. And I believe Glenn at one point got this sci-fi writer, famous one, named Harlan Ellison. You guys know him?
Yeah.
He brought him in to pitch something, and didn't work. But so we never got to do it. But it was talked about for sure.
Okay, and the last one, it says unending bickering. When the discussion turns to modern dating, Maddie takes David to an elegant dinner, and he takes her to the fights. Who says men don't know how to show a woman a good time?
That's Symphony and Knock Flat, right?
Yeah.
So and that was one. There was a woman in post-production named Pauline Miller, who was co-writer on that, and Gay Daniels' assistant, Melissa Gelano, her husband Dale Gelano, I think originally pitched that story. So Pauline and Dale, if you can follow that, wrote that show, and they did a good job, but outside writers had a tough time nailing it, and so that was a rare, I think, early show where the staff, I think, Ron and I and maybe Karen and Roger and Carrie, maybe all came together and did pieces of it. And so it was a very piecemeal script that I remember really liking. Ron loves the show. He's seen it more recently than I have, but I remember liking it a lot. But it was all of us just doing pieces of it and bringing it together, rewriting what they had done. So so I'm not sure that probably was just part of an early pitch that you heard.
Yeah.
That fun and fine evening, right? And that was the deal back. Yeah.
Okay. Was the Godzilla, was that, because I had heard that they wanted to do like a 3D episode or something. Was that the one they wanted to try to do that?
Yeah, I think so. God, Ron might be able to tell you this. I think that was the same thing, but maybe they were talked about separately also. I don't remember now, but you're right. Both of those were talked about maybe in the same breath. I'm not sure. But we just, and by the way, I was telling you about sort of the show in black, the Blackout thing, the all dialogue show. Trying that fifth season if we had been around, or fourth after the Sleeping Together. Very possibly 3D Godzilla, a couple things like that would have happened that season too, because I do know we were going to actively look for ways to have some crazy fun without absolutely dealing with the relationship all the time. You know, that same thing I said before. So I think some of those might have had a chance, but oh well.
Okay. Now, as you know, moonlighting was a national obsession when it was on the air, also known as the moonlighting phenomenon. Can you share any fun or crazy stories that exemplified it?
Yeah, I got a good one. Yeah, this was pretty great. This was pretty great, actually. I got married I got married in summer of '87, which was whatever that was, third season, something like that. And part of my honeymoon with my wife Dory was in Paris. We went a few places, but I think we ended up in Paris, and we were out to dinner. So this summer of '87, we were out to dinner at a place on the Seine that was looking out at the Eiffel Tower. Just perfect setting. You know, it was just beautiful. We were out in the patio, and it was this kind of thing where the tables are fairly close to each other. You know, two people, and then you got about a foot in between you, and then they're there. And we were in the middle of the dinner. You know, kind of a nice romantic honeymoon dinner. And the two women at the table next to us started talking about the show, and just talking about the fact that this is a show unlike any other, and we love this show. And the one on my side of the table, just was right next to me, started talking. Said, "Did you see that Shakespeare episode?" I just couldn't believe it. I've never seen anything like that on TV. Forgive me. These are her words. I'm sorry, but just so unique. And oh my God, did you see the way they flipped the ending? You know, where it was Tammy the Shrew he tamed Kate. I don't know if you know that, but the Shakespeare version was he tamed Kate. And what Ron and I did, not Glenn, despite the fact that he said he rewrote the ending, we turned that around. And so, you know, she says, no, it is the sun, not the moon, right? And gets him to come around and say she just needed to be loved, right? She didn't need to be tamed, she needed to be loved. That was that whole speech of his around the fountain at the end. And this woman said, did you see what they did at the end? They turned it around. They made it, you know, I don't know if she used the word feminist or not, but she said, oh my God, it was beautiful. I am in love with whoever wrote that speech. And literally tapped her on the shoulder and said, I'm sorry, I'm taken. And it was awesome. It was awesome. And you know, we laughed, and we ended up talking for about half an hour about the show and them, and you know, it was really cool. It was pretty great. But that's in Paris. You know, I mean, like halfway around the world. They were American too, but vacationing. But yeah, it was pretty cool. It was pretty great.
That's a great story.
I think Ron could tell this one better. There was one, which was also the Shakespeare show, I think, where someone wrote him. I believe some parents wrote about their kid being in the hospital for something pretty serious, and that they showed him the Shakespeare episode. I don't know how old the kid was, but showed him the episode and said he was giggling for the first time in like 2 months in his hospital bed, and that was pretty moving. So that might be a little bit off, but I think that's more or less what happened. And things like that, you know, they tended to happen. It was just incredibly, it was just fun, you know, just incredibly gratifying to be on that show. I loved it.
And well, it is one of a kind. It's still talked about. It's so great that we're getting new fans, new people never saw the show or becoming obsessed. So
I know it's great. It's so great that Hulu, DVDs, all of it is, you know. Are you guys? How big is your fan site?
Well, I mean, the Facebook group is pretty big. It's active. It's about 11, I think 1125, 1127 right now. 1127.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
and we grew like 600 just in last year alone.
That's great. Yeah. Congrats. That's really great.
And then And then on moonlight21.com is still active. It's still up there. The fanzines are still up there in PDF format. And we've been updating it with, YouTube channel. And anyway, it's fun. It's fun going on this ride again with the show and people.
Oh, it's really cool. I know it's fun that you guys are doing it. It's flattering as hell. And it's just, I love it. I love it. The more people that can find it, the better,
Yeah.
I'm really proud of it.
So would you say, which shows would you say before Since Moonlighting comes closest to replicating the magic of the show? Would you say?
I don't know that any has replicated it exactly, but Gilmore Girls did a great job with the fast-paced dialogue. Really funny, smart, terrific. I was a big fan. There's one show. It wasn't like Moonlighting, but one of my favorite shows ever. And you guys might not have heard of it because it aired for a few seasons, and I don't believe it's available in. It doesn't have an afterlife, and I think there are music issues. I don't know what it is, but it was a show called Ed. Does this ring a bell at all?
I've heard of it.
A guy named Tom Cavanaugh. He was new at the time. He starred in it. He was in Flash later and some other stuff. And Julie Bowen, who was the mom in Modern Family, was her character was Carol Vesey, and she was kind of the ideal of Ed. He had just moved to this new town and fell in love with her. And it was quirky. It was not exactly Moonlighting, but one of the best combinations of offbeat, romantic, and funny that I've seen since. I can't think of a lot of others. I saw a serious romance during the pandemic that I just loved and was one of those that I felt maybe more than I've felt a romance on TV before. It's called Normal People, which was great, but it's not funny. It didn't have Moonlighting humor. So, I don't think there are, the other romantic comedy type things, I don't think really did the same thing. I think Moonlight is fairly unique. That doesn't mean best. I just mean it's different. It just has a combination of things that's a little different, but.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of shows off the top of my head, like Bones and Castle are maybe two that tried to.
Well, and Glenn was on Remington Steele just before Moonlighting.
Oh, yeah.
They all did, but if I can be so bold, I just don't think they came close to the level of dialogue and sort of offbeatness. I don't think they were still a little more standard. What I mean? And good. I liked all three of those shows, but I don't think it was the same. There was something else going on with Moonlighting that was just out of the box more. But.
And if you could describe the show in one word, an adjective to encompass what it's all about, what it is to you, what would that word be? If you could describe it in one word.
Wow. Well, you used one in that last question. Magic is one, I think, because it, fun would be another one. That's not big enough. There's a phrase, it's 4 words, but lightning in a bottle, that would be it to me, because I haven't really seen the combination of not only writing, acting, and all the directing crew, all that, but also, what is it? Just a sensibility like that. There was just something new about it. I mean, even Bruce, Sybil was awesome in the show, but even Bruce was this new thing. And I just had never seen all of those elements. Nobody had ever seen Bruce. She was amazing. The writing was different than anything else on TV. And I'll if I can use 4 words, I'll just say lightning in a bottle. I think it really was that.
Okay. And now the last question. Now, do you find it interesting or entertaining to read what the authors of Moonlighting fan fiction are writing now, nearly 40 years after the show aired? The show may have ended, but Matt and David live on happily ever after most of the time. And the fans want to say that, your writing on the show was amazing and has inspired quite a few of our members to write. Marlena being one of them. And she wants to thank you both. So have you noticed all the fan fiction that's being posted on the site? Have you read any?
I've seen that you guys have posted some, and I have not read it. I'm so sorry. And I will. I really, really will. I'm sorry that I haven't seen it. And I love that you guys are all doing it. Is it Marlene or Marlena?
Marlena.
Marlena.
I'm saying Marlena, I'm assuming.
Thank you, and you're welcome, and good luck, and I hope it goes great. I will read some of this. I just haven't had the opportunity. And is it script form or prose?
It looks prose.
Is it more like a book? More like, okay.
Yeah. And they post on fanfiction.net. If you go to fanfiction.net, there's all these shows, movies that have an afterlife in fan fiction. Go to Moonlighting. There's so many of them.
Okay. Archive Our Own also is a very big fan fiction site as well.
Say it again.
Archive Our Own.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to. I love that you guys are all doing it. I love that people do that. It's fantastic. You know, I'll try to see more of it.
Okay, and well, that is
it.
it.
You know, it just occurred to me. You had mentioned Deborah Frank, and I think I mentioned a couple times the staff and the great things they were doing. Deborah and Carl Sauter were also fantastic. I love those guys, and you know, also by the way, had come in with a great thing with the Black and White show early on. We came on staff about the same time they did, I think. I think Roger and Ron and I and Deborah and Carl were kind of the initial staff when he was first putting one together. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. There you go.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. This is so much fun.
Thank you, guys. I love it. This
was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you both. It's really, really cool what you guys are doing. I really appreciate it. It's great.
Yes. And right after this, we're going to do a live watch of Witness for the Execution.
That's what I heard. But of course, now you know everything that's going to happen. You know,
it's one of my favorite episodes.
Is it?
Yeah, I remember I was only like 8. You know.
Oh my God. You were not old enough to love this episode.
Oh yes, I was, and my parents wouldn't let me stay up you know, past to watch Moonlighting, so we taped it. And I would get up early in the morning before school. And I remember watching that episode, and I was ecstatic when they kissed in the garage.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, by the way, 2 seconds. When you asked me what scenes there were that maybe were favorites in the way they got executed or whatever, that garage scene, because, you know, you can write something like that and, you know, and hope for the best, but God, I felt those two, you know. Maddie is so vulnerable in that kind of scene. That was one of them. That was one of them right there.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. As I remember. Anyway.
I think it was perfect. I think that was like the perfect way for them to kiss.
It just got to that 8-year-old heart of yours, right?
And Jeff, don't you find it amazing? So many people, members in our group, and they're watching the show when they're 7, 10, 12 years old. Can you imagine?
That's what I'm wondering. It's incredible, right? God, you couldn't have understood all the references.
Yeah. It's such an
no, I didn't. And then when it came back, you know, when I was a teenager on Bravo, then I oh wow.
Oh wait, it's funny too. Yeah. You know, that's funny. That's great. Well, thank you guys very much.
For the first time. It was like we're watching it for the first time.
I'll bet. There had to be tons of things an 8-year-old would not understand about it. You know, you could react. You could just respond to the people, and you know. You knew Bruce was having fun, even if you didn't understand what he was saying, right? That's kind of cool. Yeah.
I grew up pretty fast, so I picked up quite a bit of it, but there was definitely things a lot of double entendre that I didn't pick up on.
See, that's the kind of story you got to share with your group about you growing up pretty fast. I think we want to hear that one next. So. All right. Well, hey, thank you guys very much. Thanks for loving the show and for doing all this. It's cool. It's cool.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Great seeing you guys.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.